Hi, my name is Don. I'm a dragon. Dracolich if you're being pedantic, and Far Cry 4 is my guilty pleasure game. It has some serious flaws, but none of those get in the way of the enjoyment I get from the sheer action movie fun of the game. Being a fan of the series, I had to check out Far Cry 5, with its promise of crazy cult shenaniganry. I even got the $90 edition because I believed the extra content would be worth the price. In the end, it probably wasn't, but it sure gave me a lot to say. Hi. This is New Under the Sun, where we compare a newish game to older ones with similar themes and mechanics, so you can just save money and buy the older ones. You are a deputy sheriff in Hope County, Montana, trying to stop a doomsday cult led by the Seed family, who come in 4 flavors: Man Bun Mocha, Darwinist Dark Chocolate, Drug Haze Hazelnut, and an actual good Far Cry villain. After a strong opening, you are let loose in the open world to either play the story and side missions or just blow stuff up and somehow progress anyway, because who are Ubisoft, a multi-million-dollar video game corporation, to tell you, some guy playing video games without pants on, how to play their game? This review is going to have a lot of spoilers for Far Cry 5. Normally I don't like having spoilers in a review, but I want to discuss this game as a whole, especially the ending, because let's say it had an effect on me. Also, I won't be talking about Far Cry Arcade, because I don't really care about it. The beginning of the game is one of the most striking openings I've ever played. Even though you're simply going down to Joseph's compound to arrest him during one of his sermons, it very quickly establishes the main themes of Far Cry 5, the dangerous religious fanaticism of the New Eden cult, and the horrifying situation you're in, neatly bringing Far Cry back to its roots of being an environment of danger and fear. We have 3 smaller villains, much like Far Cry 4, on the path towards the big baddie. But as I alluded to in the intro, one of these adversaries is far more interesting than the others, including Joseph Seed himself. Allow me to explain. Joseph Seed is the big guy in charge, the head of the Seed family, and has the cultiest characteristics to him. I mean, someone jumped into the spinning blades of a helicopter for him. But apart from the intro and a few cinematics, you don't really see a whole lot of him. He says a few things like how his wife died in childbirth, then he killed his child because God told him to, but he's only really there to enable the other crazies, who you'll end up spending most of the 15-ish hours of gameplay with. Your hosts include Jacob, Joseph's older brother who believes in the complex philosophy of big muscle good, puny babies bad, and after hypnotizing you with some 1950s doo-wop, which makes you go on a kill-crazy rampage, which is silly because it's Far Cry and you were already on a kill-crazy rampage, and having the game tell you to do it just seems like a convenient way to
oh, there it is! Look, you killed a good guy! Bad player, bad! Morality qualms!
Which is kind of laughable, because this game treats killing NPCs like America treats its gun crisis. Then there's Faith Seed, with the magical drug powers of drugging people. What? She also teleports. What? And throws fireballs? What kind of drugs do that? Finally, you have John Seed, a lawyer who uses his legal acumen to take ownership of most of the land in Hope County. He also acts as a faux self-help guru who pushes the idea that life's better when you just say yes, which is the most overtly culty thing in this game. But that is just a front for who he truly is. A masochist and a sadist obsessed with making people confess their sins in a tortuous baptism. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things should have been the main and only villain. Far Cry 3 had a similar issue of villains of varying quality, but it actually dealt with it properly. The game was sold on the amazing performance of Michael Mondo as the antagonist boss. He's literally the face of the game. But he dies 2/3 of the way into the story and is then replaced by Hoyt, a guy whose name I had to Google. However, unlike Far Cry 5, Far Cry 3 shifted the focus away from the villain-driven plot and instead turns to your own main character's Jason Brody's descent into savagery. In Far Cry 5, however, you're a custom-built character, with no personality, no backstory, and no ability to articulate words. You're a clean slate with an almost forced motive of saving your friends! So when you meet your friendly local cult leader and they wax poetic about how you're descending into madness, it leaves you sitting there like, am I though? The Seed family interactions have been written like it's a character-driven story like Far Cry 3, but you play as a mute who can only express himself in grunts, contextual button presses, or murder. One really has to wonder why Ubisoft removed something from Distant Yelling 5 that was so widely praised in Flaming Cassowaries 3. Now this might just be a theory, but I may have found a pattern. Far Cry 3 was very well reviewed, 9 out of 10, like Skyrim with guns. But then Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon came out, and it was amazing. So Ubisoft had these two games that played really well, and that led to something incredibly dangerous: expectations. So they decided to go for two birds with one stone. They got a stoner bird. Two in the bush. Rockcock, never mind. They made Far Cry 4, which had all the dressings of Far Cry 3, the charismatic villain, the exotic locale, the progression, but it had the stuffing of Far Cry Blood Dragon, the coke-fueled gameplay, bombastic action sequences, and much like the Thanksgiving turkey, the stuffing was the best part. People loved the action but lamented the poor story execution, and no one got more flack than Ajay Ghale, our titular hero. Now I like Ajay, even though he says his name wrong, but the guy only has two settings: going along with whoever told him what to do, or being mad at someone. And those two emotions are in the body of some kind of Green Beret murder machine? Like, Jason Brody started his adventure scared, fearful, and terrified. But Ajay Ghale starts with...
This will soon be behind us. We'll be off on a grand adventure. Because I have cleared my calendar. You and I are gonna tear shit up! Should I stay or should I go?
From a story perspective, Ajay is a lost boy who's just trying to find his place in the world. But in gameplay, he's the goddamn Terminator. People thought it was super dumb and complained about how jarring it was how Ajay was both an impotent teddy bear while simultaneously being Brown Rambo. So the French soft boys were like,
Mais I guess if we want to sell the action, we should just stick to the blank slate character who don't try to be empathetic, like Powercut in Blood Dragon.
but they still wanted both those birds. So in Yodeling Over Yonder 5, you get stories of the New Eden cult being horrifyingly cruel, drugging, torturing, and crucifying all over the place, but then you also have Herc and his quest for his father's begrudging approval, and Cheeseburger, the threadbare with diabetes! It's absolutely absurd that all these things exist in the same game, and hell, it's not even talking about the co-op multiplayer or the side quests where you made contact with aliens and get a fart gun. Yeah. If you want a game that handles their grim topics in a serious way without compromising gameplay, you want... By no means is Wolfenstein a perfect game. It has similar problems with difficulty that Far Cry has, which is just play on normal! It calls you a baby, but who cares? It's not fun playing on hard difficulties in most FPSs. But Wolfenstein tackles a world turned upside down by Nazis, and the only answer is bullets. Which make it seem campy like Blood Dragon, but it still manages to tell a compelling story about characters, and builds a dark, cruel world for you. As BJ Blazkowicz whispers the exposition, making you feel like he's not just a blank slate, but a character with a stake in what's going on.
I'm gonna ask you one question. You are gonna answer that question in a way I find satisfactory, and if you do not, I will saw your head off with this here appliance, you hear me?
It's just got the right blend of seriousness and fun that Far Cry 5 is begging for. How Wolfenstein achieved this is by giving context, establishing stakes, and giving you goals in the story that inform the player about what's going on, so you know why you're murdering all these people, i.e. because the Nazis are the worst humanity has to offer and should be treated as such. Far Cry 5's themes struggle to make proper appearances. They're there in bits and pieces in the cutscenes, but Ubi's insistence on trying to cover the largest audience possible and appeal to everyone instead of focusing on a few themes and emotional beats makes the game really feel like it was made by several hundred people. I mean, it was, but it's not supposed to feel like it is. It's meant to be an immersive, cohesive experience. Instead, it's like 100 of little tone-deaf vignettes sprinkled on the same gameplay as before. You were not meant to play Far Cry 5. You were meant to consume it. I can sit down and play for hours, but not because it's gripping me, but because it's doing the barest minimum to keep me there. Little snacky bit here, I got a challenge done there, get some perk points. Where you walk into an objective, have a truck full of baddies because walking 5 feet without having enemies thrown at you might be bad for your attention span. There's all these little things, shiny doodads, side quests, allied people just waiting to be done. Wait, no. I mean, Far Cry 5 is actively trying to make the effort of having everything involved be a part of the open world, with missions and side activities giving you progression through the story without having to do explicit story missions. You can progress as much as you like, to a point. At certain arbitrary progression values, however, you are kidnapped. The game literally kidnaps your character and forces you to participate in a story mission. Now, the first time this happens, it was pretty cool, because it really sold the idea of this kidnapping cult. But then it happens 8 more times, each time for a more contrived reason, i.e. teleporting drug powers and ninjas? It sounds strange, but I would have more fun if I had more agency in these kidnapping sections. The problem with these pacing brick walls is that it shows a basic distrust of the player to actually play the game. I want to play this game, I want to go through the story, that's why I'm playing it. I will get to the story missions, but maybe I want to hunt a buffalo or blast a cultist with an alien fart gun. I don't know, but please just trust I will play through these story missions. These kidnappings literally remove me from one game and force me into what feels like a completely different game. Speaking of pacing, Far Cry 5 introduces microtransactions into the game. And no offense to anyone who actually bought them, but Far Cry 5's microtransactions are so unrewarding and small it seems almost insulting. Like, gun skins in a single-player game. Yeah, that's totally what I want. Additionally, Ubisoft clearly didn't consider gun balance in this game, as you can get the best SMG in the game through Uplay points. They patched in a better one, but why? You're just given crazy weapons from the other DLCs if you own them, surgically removing any challenge from the game with a deft stroke. I shouldn't have to avoid using certain weapons because they break the game. You shouldn't have given them to me. As Civ 4 designer Soren Johnson said, players will find a way to optimize the fun out of your game. Because I could exclusively use the infinite ammo laser guns you gave me for owning the season pass, and wipe the game out. But the game is quite long and it would get painfully boring. And what baffles me is that this is the core mechanic of the game. Shooting dudes! That's what it should have the most polished balance and thought put into it, but instead it's just like, whatever, put a silencer on everything and go wild. In Far Cry 2, all the elements are there to provide a certain feeling to the player. The breaking guns, the malaria, the save system, it's there to establish a feeling of danger and uncertainty. These cruel elements, which were lambasted by critics, add that little bit of uncertainty that adds some variety and excitement to shooting dudes. In Far Cry 5, you can do the same stupid strat over and over again till it works. They did keep the buddy system, however, except your buddy is either useless and dead or useful and about to be dead. But you do really need them, but not as a partner in crime, but because they removed the really good segmented health system for just a normal bar that depletes as soon as an enemy with an LMG looks at you. But that is just creating problems for your solutions that don't even fix them half the time. These guns for hire can only do certain tasks, as anything else will end with them clutching their bullet wounds begging for a revive. Also, for some reason, you can just hire random goons as your guns for hire instead of the established casts of friends and fauna, and I have no idea why. You need to have them follow you around for a while, just so they can be less effective than your dog Boomer, who completely breaks the game, as he marks every single cultist within the square mile, and is the goodest of boys. Why would you want anyone else? But what did they add to the game compared to the latest installation?
They added a much more freeform perk system.
Yay, I'm glad I have the option to unoptimize myself.
You can fly planes and helicopters.
So I can either be safe from gunfire and barely able to affect the battlefield, or be able to mow people down but also just sitting in the most fragile possible thing in an action video game?
How about this? They increased the grind to get new guns that are sometimes worse than the guns you already have, to encourage you to spend real-world money on a digital gun that has paint on it.
Let's just talk about Just Cause 3. Just Cause 3 is really sweet and really simple. Bad guy's bad. Check. Good guy wins by blowing stuff up. Check. Fun comic relief character. Check plus. It's all the stuff that makes a dumb action game great. And while it's clearly not designed with keyboard and mouse in mind, with some getting used to in like 20 minutes in the key bindings menu, you'll be swinging around causing chaos. Honestly, it just feels like Just Cause 3 succeeds because of how simple it was. Most massive AAA teams are plagued by thousands of little things that just absolutely have to be in a game, so one guy on Reddit can point out how immersive it is. But focusing on these unimportant things takes away from finding bugs, refining the core gameplay, or remembering to treat your employees like human beings, Rockstar! But I digress. The point is that Just Cause 3, while not perfect, has a simple story and a gameplay focus that comes together wonderfully. So let's see how the whole package of Far Cry 5 comes together.
People say that I'm crazy.
Far Cry 5 seems like it would be a better game if it were shorter. And this better game exists within Far Cry 5. If you just added some more mission and pacing to John's Hall and Valley, it would be a great Far Cry game. Obviously, a lot of care and effort has gone into the creation of this world, but Ubisoft's idea that bigger is supposedly better has muddied their vision on what makes a good action game. Far Cry 5 has a strange need to build up this oppressive world like Far Cry 2 and 3, but also wants to have the emphasis on fun and wanton destruction from Blood Dragon and 4. The balance between the meaningful story and having a balls-to-the-wall power fantasy is incredibly difficult to manage, and this game has failed to do so. It feels like there are completely separate games existing within this one, and I'm not just talking about the DLC. This divide isn't shown anywhere more than in the ending, because oh my god, Far Cry 5 has one of the worst endings of any video game I've ever played. Alright, so check it. This whole time we're building up this idea that we can stand against evil, that no matter the cost, good will prevail. What happens when you finally get to the final boss and make him eat his teeth? A nuke hits and kills everyone. Yeah. I wish I was joking. I wish I could come up with a joke that's as surprising as that ending. This whole time, Joseph Seed has been saying that a collapse will come, that the apocalypse will come, the only way to survive is go to his family's cool bunkers. So once you've killed everyone, and you're finally going to show that man-bun-wielding televangelist poser what for, he says that everyone's going to die, and then the sky clears up. And it seems like the whole story is going to wrap up okay. Good news, everyone. The crazy cult is crazy. Then the nukes hit, and you try to get away with your cop friends, but your car crashes. You survive because you're you, of course, and Joseph gets free, kills the guy who saved you in the intro, and says you and him are family now, and you're going to live with him forever, completely disregarding the fact that you both definitely have radiation poisoning. Now there's also alternative endings, and not only are they bad, it makes no sense to get them. You get all the way to the end and decide not to kill the big bad and just go home for some reason. And at this point, you've already killed his whole family and several hundred cultists. And you want to know what's your ending for doing the silliest thing? You drive off with your cop friends, then you kill them all because the sheriff turns on the radio and it's that 50s doo-wop and you just rustles your jimmies. Now in Far Cry 4, in the intro, you can listen to the villain when he tells you to sit still like the ineffectual white boy that Ajay Ghale talks like, instead of the brown killing machine that he plays like, and you get a new ending, where you fulfill your mother's wishes and then probably go home instead of the wild adventure ride of the rest of the game. In Far Cry 5, if you do this, you just go home. You do nothing. The sheriff says you'll die if you arrest him, and you just go home. It's stupid. Don't get me wrong, the Far Cry 4 ending isn't the greatest either, but it makes sense story-wise. While in 5, it's just there because it was there in the last one. But at the end of the day, the worst part is that there's no reason for Joseph to win. It's not like he's done less atrocities than we have. The game starts with him personally gouging someone's eyes out for crying out loud. So this whole time, his visions of the future were completely true, and it's all part of God's plan. What? Why? I have no problems with unhappy endings, but this is still a bad ending. Nowhere in any writing guide does it say, by the way, make sure that the cult that kills people for sport and crucifies people was right the whole time. I can make up a better ending on the spot. Give me a second. Ahem. So after you beat him up, he says that God will not abandon him or something like that. But instead of several nukes hitting in the middle of nowhere, Montana, you have the choice of either killing Joseph or arresting him. If you kill him, once you reach the National Guard, they arrest you for the sheer amount of people you turned into fertilizer. And then he laughs in your head, because despite you having saved all these people, you're treated the same as him. A madman. A murderer. If you arrest him, you are also brought with him into jail for the wholesale slaughter, and he tries to goad you into killing him with the 50s doo-wop. And if you do, he calls you a slave to your own wrath or something like that, and you get put into an insane asylum. If you choose not to kill him, then he just collapses, crying on the floor, because his god abandoned him and he can't make anyone do anything anymore. See? It's not tough to connect a game to its ending, and the ending we got feels like it's meant for a completely different game. Besides the cult was right the whole time thing, the major weakness of the abhorrent endings is that it kills all motivation to play the game again. Why do anything at all, if everyone's just gonna get nuked? It would work as a film's ending, but a $60 game should have at least some kind of replay value. But maybe you need to pay $90 for that. There are 3 different games in the Far Cry 5 Season Pass. The first is Lost on Mars. Remember that Antlion chapter from Half-Life 2 with the whole don't touch the sand thing? That's the whole game! It's miserable! The next is Hours of Darkness, which is just a simplified Far Cry, except it takes place in Nam. But it doesn't have the sweet soundtrack or a compelling narrative of a man as a wolf to man of other media set in this era, so what's the point? Last up is Dead Living Zombies. The story is that our main character is trying to get his campy zombie movie approved by famous Hollywood directors, and each chapter is a different movie script pitched to a different director. And while the gameplay isn't that innovative, the story was fun, and it shows that maybe there's someone at Ubisoft who does care. But if that just makes you sad that talented individuals are smothered in a massive corporation with no ability to properly express themselves, I wouldn't recommend buying the Season Pass. Honestly, if you're looking for a fun, open-world game that doesn't really take itself too seriously and paces its gameplay well enough to the end, I would recommend playing Far Cry 4. While its story isn't as strong as Far Cry 3, 4 looks the nicest out of the series, because the Rocky Mountains can't really compare to the majesty of the Himalayas. And it plays like the Wild Action Ride 5 tried to be when it wasn't failing to be deep. If you want a balls-to-the-wall action spectacle, I would pick up Just Cause 3, but if you want your murder with some context and moral righteousness, then pick up either Wolfenstein: The New Order or its sequel. Both are quite good. Of course, your choices don't matter because, in the end, we're all going to be nuked.